Absolutely, go for it. I'm a big capitalist, and I believe that money is not a bad thing. You do need a certain amount of it, but I think mostly it doesn't give you happiness. Mostly happiness comes from your relationship with those around you, the unconditional love thing, bilaterally, but also in helping other people who are less fortunate. And God knows there's a ton of them. I know a guy who takes 100 supermarket plastic bags to the supermarket, fills them with staples, and then goes out in his van and just goes up to homeless people and gives them each a bag. And I do believe he makes himself happy as a result. You can Google him. He's a good friend. He has been part of the volunteer force of every charity since my original one decades ago.
Welcome to the Happy Soul Podcast. My name is Melissa, and this is Sammy. We are diving deep into conversations that connect and inspire. Stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation. Stories that take us to the heart of human connection. Please note that opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect those of this podcast. Please listen with your kindness and an open mind. Each story shared is authentic and vulnerable. Let's embrace our differences with empathy, knowing every voice enriches us. Together, let's cultivate a community of respect and curiosity. Thank you for listening. Now sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired.
Welcome to the Happy Soul Podcast, everybody. Today we are here with Peter Samuelson. If you don't know of Peter Samuelson, he is a producer, a co-founder of multiple charitable organizations, and now an author, among many other things. We had a guest once, and after reading her book, Melissa said, when you finish a book and you just really wish you could speak to the author and ask so many questions? Well, we feel that way about this book. It was like, if I had read it and this interview wasn't set up, I would have been like, oh my gosh, I wish I could talk to him and ask this pile of questions. And we get to do that. And that is just one of the coolest feelings. And so we're so grateful to have you here. And honestly, truthfully, how could we not have the author of a book called Finding Happy on the Happy Soul Podcast? Like, how could we not? That's just the most amazing thing. And so we really just want to jump in and ask, because one of the things that really stuck out to us in your book was, for lack of a better term, your levels of impact. And I don't have a better way of saying that, but everything just kept on expanding. It started, making films, but it started with ill children. Then it started with immobile ill children. Then it was foster children. And then it was global children. And then it was the homeless. And now it's a book. And it seems to us that it's like, okay, here's one thing I can impact. Here's another thing I can impact. And after those charities, then it's like, okay, how can I reach beyond those charities? I want to ask starting, is that how the book came to be? Is that what that was for you?
Well, it's a little more mundane than that, but I do think that in the end, it's sort of like, those Russian dolls, one inside another. There's like me in the middle of them, but there are these kind of ripples there's a mixed metaphor, that these ripples on the pond, and it's become much more than I had ever expected. What happened is, so I founded a charity in 1999 called firststar.org. It's really simple. Foster kids do not go to college, and that is really silly, because if anybody needs to go to college, it would be a child, a young adult, a ninth grader, who doesn't have a family, is living with strangers, and is carrying maybe some PTSD from abuse and neglect in the past. They need college. It will mean that they won't be homeless for an extra 4 years, and they will have a community, and so forth. So way back, I approached UCLA and I said, here's what I want to pilot. I met with Gene Block, was the vice chancellor, and I said, I want to house, educate, and encourage 9th through 12th grade foster kids in cohorts or classes of 30 in the middle of your campus. And miraculously, or by an act of God, he said yes. And we raised the money and we did it. And it has become a colossally successful nonprofit venture. We have 12 of these academies, each at a big American university. And then we have another 3, almost 4 in the UK. And in the United States, with no help, less than 6% of American foster kids go to colleges or universities. Our kids, after we've had them for 4 years, ninth through 12th grade, 89% get into college. And we've now got, you know, young adults in medical school and architects and engineers and all sorts of professionals. We just had the alumni awards, and we gave, frankly, everybody who tuned in got an award. But what sticks out in my mind, we gave one to someone who just bought their first house, and we gave another one who to someone, he and his wife have just had twins. And so he's new to fatherhood. It's really successful. So what I've done, as well as leading First Star for all these years, is I do mentoring. And I must have mentored hundreds of young adults, not only through First Star and the other First Star in the UK, but also, directly. And I'm a member of a thing called the Mentor Project. And I realized, isn't it fascinating? There's like 24 things that pop up again and again and again that are perplexing, bothering them. And I thought it's kind of like chapter headings. If I wrote a book, I could reach many more young adults, and, by no means only those in foster care. I should write broadly because, interestingly, you can be a middle-class kid in a good family and still be perplexed. And the last people on the planet you want to hear from are your parents. So I thought I could do a thing here. So I could, if there's a chapter, and there is, what is a good risk? What is a bad risk? How can you tell the difference? I then thought, as a film producer, I kind of have pattern recognition. I've made all the mistakes in the risk area, and I can use them to illustrate risks not to take. Like, I once heard a kitten meowing in the middle of the night, and I climbed 5 floors down a pipe duct in a hotel that was 150 years old. And I got to the bottom, and there was the kitten, and it took one look at me and ran away. And I never saw or heard it again. And I then realized I can't get back up. What will happen to me? I'm going to die in a hotel pipe duct. And I shouted and shouted, and I tried to climb up, but I was like climbing 10 feet and slipping back 12 feet. And I thought, I'm going to actually die in this pipe duct. Anyway, you'd have to read, the listeners would have to read the book to find out. Clearly I survived, but that is an example of a risk that especially a young man would take, and shouldn't take. It's not a coincidence that we send our young men to climb out of the trench and charge forward towards the machine guns that are firing at them. It is because they are willing to go. If you ask the middle-aged men to go run at the machine gun, generally speaking, they'll say, oh, it looks incredibly dangerous. And the reason for that is that the front of your brain, which is the chess game of life, girls get it earlier, boys don't get it till their late 20s. Until then, they are operating on the amygdala, which is at the back of your brain. It's the reptilian fight or flight thing. Oh, the tiger is going to eat me. Should I run or should I fight? To which, of course, if the front of your brain was working, you would think, oh, actually, I don't have to run faster than the tiger. I only have to run faster than the man standing next to me. So I started writing the book. I think you have to be disciplined. That's one of the things that's in the book, how to be organized and how to be methodical and how to break your big challenges down into bite-sized chunks that you can conquer. So I started getting up at 5 o'clock every morning, and I wrote for an hour. And eventually I had a book, and I thought I'll have to self-publish it on Amazon. And then somebody introduced me to a rather good book agent. Next thing I know, there's a bit of a bidding war going on, and Simon & Schuster Regalo got it. And June 10, it'll be all over the place. and in bookstores and all the online, the Barnes and Noble and the Amazon. And I also had the very strange, funny experience of reading my own book into a microphone in a booth. Took me 4 days, 6 hours a day to do it with a guy called Paul behind the glass over there, who every so often would say, go back to the beginning of the paragraph because you fluffed a word. So it's an audio book, it's a paperback, and it is a Kindle book, an ebook. So I have no idea who will buy it, but I think the buyership is any adult who cares about a young adult. Parents, grandparents, Uncle Phil, Auntie Sheila, a teacher in high school or a lecturer, whatever in college. And it's designed so, sure, you can sit down as you did and start at the beginning and go through to the end, but you could also use the table of contents and say, oh, that bothers me a lot. I should go straight to that. So, what I've done is this is my sole attempt at graphic design in my entire life. I have the graphic design ability of a newt, but what I did is the first version of the cover. And what I did is I used AI and asked it to rank in order of prevalence what the book is about, the topics, the nouns, and I made the font of those words bigger the more prevalent and important they seemed. So you have, big ones: life, health, success, social media, mentors, kindness, and so forth. But then when you get in closer, you have all the little
Oh
words that
yeah.
afflict young people: parents, dare, school, exams, support, dating, those kind of
So
things.
good.
So there you go. Finding happy. We all need to do that, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Yes,
it's
so good.
amazing. And I really actually wanted to compliment that about for you. Not that I know anything about books, but when I was reading it, my kids kept saying to me like, "What are you doing on your phone?" I was like, "Well, I'm reading this book," and I was explaining to them, and I have three, but my 5 and 7 year old specifically, and they said, "Can you read it to us?" So I was finding chapters that were appropriate to read to them, and I read them the Pink Panther story, which was one that they
Oh, did you?
absolutely I did, and they absolutely loved it. And then I can't remember if this is the same chapter or not, but talking about the risk benefit analysis, and so we asked them those questions that you have at the end of that chapter, and we had them answering, and obviously theirs were very simple about little things, but they were thinking about the good risk and the bad risk of these things. And so even to those young ages, the way that you've worded your books and the stories in there, like it's comprehensible and understandable. Yes, it required some description from us, but they were enthralled and they loved it. And so like I can only imagine people who are older and reading it, middle school, high school, young adults, like it's there's just so much practicality to it. And so I think that's an amazing way that you put it together is what I just really wanted to say.
Well, you're very kind. I already love your children, and I've never met them.
They are pretty wonderful.
They will clearly go far.
Yes, they will.
Here's hoping. Here's hoping. I really want to ask you about this. I'm going to just shift a little bit from what you were talking about, but something that you wrote in your book. And you were talking about the concept of should I, could I, and would I? And it's something that I've kind of touched on a bit myself, but I would just really love for you to expand on that mentality of making those choices between should I do this, could I do this, and would I do this, and the decision making that can come in your life from that.
Well, unwinding that, should I is very much different than could I. Um, you know, and I suppose will I is the other one. And it's all to do with what I said earlier. It's you've got to use the front of your brain. I think that the empowerment that I've tried to weave through the book is that you are actually the author of the rest of your life. I say to the foster kids, yeah, terrible, awful things have been done to you. I'm so sorry. But actually, those horrible people, they are not part of determining your future. You are. Do you want to play the violin or be an engineer? That's up to you. And there are pathways to get to either. And they're both valid. And you can actually pursue two things at once and have a plan B. And so on and so forth. So I think what the book is trying to do in the area of can I, it is to empower young people to believe that they can and to give them actual toolkits on how they can. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should. And part of being a young adult should be to experiment between, career paths, things to study, who to be friends with, and so on and so forth. And part of that has to come from experimentation. And the metaphor that I've used in the book is imagine if your life, you're sitting inside an envelope and it's dark, so you can't see the edges of it, but you have a pencil and the pencil has a point. You can either sit cross-legged in the middle of the envelope, do nothing, and then wonder, when you retire, why did I do nothing? Or you can poke with the pencil, and sure, every so often, if you poke with the pencil, you will go through the edge and you will have to pull it back and say, whoops, I will never be a concert pianist. But then you have the great honor and privilege of poking in a different direction and finding what you can be. And you will find all sorts of things that you can be. And then you can experiment with them. This is, why we wherever possible, we strongly encourage the foster kids to go to college. Is it's 4 years where you can radically reinvent yourself within the curricula of the university, and you can really find your way. And there are subtleties to it, like, sure, I would never dissuade you as a filmmaker. If you want to be a writer, producer, actor, something incredibly difficult to become, I would never dissuade you. Of course you should do that. Make little films. And, there's a whole section in the book about how to get into the film industry if you don't have an uncle who's already in it. However, it's very difficult and the odds against you are long indeed. That doesn't mean don't do it. Of course you should do it. It's your passion, but you must have a plan B, because what you don't want to do is to have a failure that means that you then can't put food on the table and raise your family and, live a happy life. So having a plan B, but if you want to be a famous actor, you may end up working in a bank very happily and doing amateur theatricals in the village hall on the weekends. And hey, you're an actor. Okay, so you're not a film star, but that's not what it's cracked up to be. I know a lot of them, and none of them is what they're cracked up to be. I'm here to tell you. So they just have very good publicists. So, yeah, I think that's the difference between I can and I should. And in the area of risk taking, just because you think you can do something, you should actually look at what we call the law of unintended consequences, which is and I did this, if I shin up that drain pipe and then inch along at 2 o'clock in the morning on the third floor level, on the outside of the building, laterally with my feet on a ledge that is only half a brick wide, holding on by the grout to an upper brick, I shouldn't have done that to avoid ringing the doorbell and having the anger possibly of my father. I should have rung the doorbell. My fault I didn't take the keys with me. The next day, down in the back garden, I looked up at the face of the house and I looked down at the flagstones, and I was so frightened at what I had done, which could well have killed me, or almost as bad. I could have been in a wheelchair the rest of my life. I was just staggeringly frightened, realizing that on impulse, I had climbed 3 floors up a drain pipe and then inched along a wall, a ledge, not even a wall. So that would be a risk not to take. And that would be something, yeah, I could do it. Clearly, I could do it. I did it. I thought I could do it, and I did do it. But that doesn't mean that it was a good risk to take at all. I shouldn't have done it.
Wow.
Yes. Reading that part, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe. I would have been like, I'll get in trouble. Like, I will absolutely get in trouble. There's no way I'm climbing.
Well, it's in many ways our young women. I mean, I know this because I've mentored both. Our young women are just smarter, earlier, and more self-protective, and also, dare I say, more pro-social than our young men. I mean, I particularly try and focus on the young men, A, because I was one, so perhaps I have more, crazy, mad examples from my career to talk about. Um, but also, I think they need more help at the moment. I think that a lot of our young adult boys, men, Gen Z and the lower millennials, I think they're pretty lost. And I think purpose and direction and actually how they can get out of their funk and find happy. I think that's like a really valuable set of
100%.
life lessons. And that's what I've tried to do in the book.
100%. As you're talking about the young people and about the challenges that they're facing, there's so many new challenges now that generations before, like it's all of the physiological things that you're talking about, plus there's all of this new technology that's facing these young people. This is they're they're going through a new thing. So like I think that finding happy, it has, I mean, it's always been important, but it feels very prudent right now that it needs to be a conscious effort. It needs to be conscious work because there's a lot fighting against it. And it's sometimes just not going to come naturally. You're going to have to work for it. And I just think that somebody starting out by reading this book is just what a great way to start making a conscious effort to finding that happy,
God,
I
I
feel.
hope so. Um, there's a chapter in the book, the one about technology and
Hmm.
making it your helper and not your master or mistress. Um, the title of the book is all acronyms: AI, VR, AVR, EIEIO, LOL. That's
Yes.
the title of the chapter. Um,
So good.
the relationship between young adults and AI, it's very important to empower them to get the best out of it and none of the worst. Because, for example, in too many cases, kids in high school and in college are thinking that they can use AI to replace their brain in creating the homework responses, writing the essay, whatever it may be. And that vitiates, does away with the whole purpose of the homework, which is
Yeah.
to make the class sink into your brain so that it will be helpful to you. And in an exam room, you're not going to have the AI. Furthermore, did you realize that there's different AI that your teachers are using to see whether you use AI? And it doesn't go down very well if your entire accomplishment is not really yours. It's this
Wild.
exogenous brain. Um, it's not all bad
Hmm.
because I do think, when I think back to when I was young, like when I was the scaredy cat scholarship kid in a good university, I could read any book in the university library, but I could only read one at a time. And I had to go and put it back on the shelf after I'd finished looking at it in order to be allowed to take another book down. That's nothing like the access to all the knowledge in the world that your average high schooler has now. I mean, you are literally connected. I mean, I remember my son Jeffrey at dinner, I used to joke, why do you know? We would talk about some topic and he would know something about it. And it would be something that I couldn't believe he had had any experience of it. So how could he possibly have anything to say? And he was usually spot on. And he said, "Oh, well, because I was doing homework and then I hyperlinked to this guy in Korea who, and I went backwards and forwards with him, and he said I should talk to someone in France. And then that led me to a book online about so and so and such and such. And I thought to myself, he has now accessed, he's got, as not as a crutch, but as an enablement, he's got all the knowledge in the world.
Yeah.
And this is an amazing generation of young adults to grow up and lead us because they will be, if they get it right, they will be really, really well informed. Unfortunately, there are things that push against that. The whole political rabbit hole nonsense bilaterally that goes on at the moment. And a lot of lies that take on the patina of truth online just because someone says them 12 times.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, there are constructs that the profit making companies that run online sites and, the rest of it, that tend to stop our young adults from reading widely. There's a great risk of going further and further down the rabbit hole where you only actually hear from people who you already agree with. And sure, there's some comfort there, but it's very dangerous. Your job, and this is a whole part of the book, is to apply critical thinking. Don't let someone else tell you what to think. Do your research. You're good at research. It's one of the things we teach. And I think that's really necessary because what you're not going to get from the rabbit hole of those you already agree with is the ethics, the morality, the countervailing view, the view outside your own little tribe, an understanding of other, and therefore an embrace of other. 8 billion people on the planet. That's an awful lot of people. And thousands of different tribes and religions and countries and different civilizations and so forth. You want to get more than a taste of a whole lot of them because that's how you become a worthy citizen. You want to lift up your family, your town, your country, your planet. But in order to do that, you better use your young adult years to learn an awful lot about it in order to lead from the front, from knowledge.
Yeah. I think so much of what you're saying is exactly why your book is so helpful because on top of the work you're doing with First Star, but like you talk about in the book and like you're just saying now, it's important to get good information and find a good mentor. And those kinds of things are really hard to come by if you don't know how to vet them and pull out what is good information, what is truthful information. And not only that, when it comes to a good mentor, is everybody out there now is selling like, let me mentor you in this, let me mentor you in that, and this, that, and the other thing. And it's great, but it's also hard to figure out who is actually the right person to go to. And coming from someone such as yourself, you have solid example. Obviously, I don't know you personally. I don't know your personal life. I can only read what I can read about in their book or online or speaking with you now. But you have examples of things that have actually led to your success in life in all of these different areas. And you don't have access to everybody who claims they're a mentor to see what their life actually turned out to be with all of their information. And I think that your book can be so valuable to people in that way because of where you've come to in your life and the things that you've done. And I don't just mean producing hit films. I mean like the charities you've raised and the people you're impacting and the EDAR program. And like there's so many incredible things that have made such a difference in this world and have led to a good life and a happy life for you that I just feel like reading your book is like, here's your mentor, and no, you're not asking him personal questions, but he's giving you personal insight to make those decisions in your life. And it's just, I don't know. I feel like it's just like, here's this booklet and here you go. And it's going to help you in life. And I'm not saying there's not other good ones. It's just hard to find and know the good ones because you don't know the background of the person who has written it and what they've actually achieved in their life. And, you see life coaches now, and I don't mean to speak negatively, but they don't have their own success in their own life. And it's, well, how are you coaching me to have a successful life if you aren't able to do that yourself? And you've got that. And so I think that's just really incredible about that book.
Well, the joke is those who can do, and those who can't do become life coaches. Uh, so, yeah. And I think the great privilege of working with so many young adults in foster care is that it's a very exacerbated, hypercritical need to sort out who is a empowering and safe mentor, because you have to be so careful. For example, with the young women and sometimes with the young men, mentoring can be a pathway for predators to get their hooks into a young adult.
Grooming.
And we as a charity, as an organization, and also one-on-one, we have to just be incredibly careful to fully vet them. We run their fingerprints through the FBI database. We check in other states. We don't turn some random adult loose on young adults who may be very vulnerable. Certainly those in foster care, they're all carrying PTSD and so forth. And one has to realize sometimes young adults don't know what is best for them. And therefore having a protective sense of, look before you leap. It's tricky because you also want to say, sometimes you have to leap. And for example, there's a whole section in the book about when is failure good and productive. In Silicon Valley, when a young, smart person has this wizard new idea, but they need a couple of $1 million to, do it, to execute, they go and meet with venture capitalists. The venture capitalists may ask, what have you done that you're proud of? But what they mostly ask early in the interview is, tell me about a failure and what you learned from it. And I believe one of the pressures that is unfortunate that we place on young adults is that at all costs, they have to avoid failing. Better to sweep the floor in McDonald's, I know I can do that, than to try to get into engineering school. And that's not necessarily the right thing. You have to dare to do. You can't sit cross-legged in that dark envelope. And you have to be willing to fail. But you need to fail in directions that won't kill you because you failed.
Yeah.
Do not climb up the drain pipe. Do not trim down the pipe duct.
Yes. 100%. And it starts so young. It starts so young that we can teach that ability to fail. Like even, one example is like kids learning to write. Is they're writing their letters, and if they make a mistake, you say, that's okay, we can start a new one. No, let them cross it off and let people know that they failed and they tried again and they kept writing. It's okay that they spelt it wrong. Like that's such an early point to show like, it's okay, you messed up. Do it again next time. It's like, just fix it. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And it starts so early. And I said it to my son the other day. He's 5. He loves to climb everything. And he's climbing trees. And I said, okay, you can climb this high, but no higher. He goes, why? Well, so if you fall from there, it's a broken arm or a broken leg. That's fine. If you fall from higher, it's a broken spine or a broken skull. That's not okay. And so there's a lesson you can learn in that safety, and it applies so young. And if we don't, I'm not saying I'm doing it right. I have no idea. I'm making this up as I go, but it starts young in saying that those failures are okay. And if we don't teach it to them young, it becomes harder and harder and harder as we get older to accept that failure and trying again is okay.
A sweet thing and definitely a lesson in parenting that I got was that we used to do when the kids were little, we would sit, my wife and I have 4 kids, and we would sit at the dinner table, and every single time from when they were so little they could hardly put a sentence together, we would start with the youngest and go to the oldest. What are your highs and what are your lows? And I remember when my daughter was, I suppose, 8, she said, well, my high is that I got an excellent on this homework that I did. And she gave it to me. And sure enough, across the corner at the top, it said A*, excellent, EXY Lint. And I took from that, my daughter is feeling too much pressure to excel. She has fabricated the teacher's grade in order to please her father and mother. And we de-escalated some things because we felt that was unreasonable for a little girl.
Oh, that's incredible that you saw that, though. That you saw that and said, oh, maybe this is too much for her.
I actually have it on the wall in the next room. EXYLINT, Exilint, A star. God bless.
Oh my gosh.
I love that so much, just how you translated that into how she was feeling. And that is just incredible. I love that.
Yes.
And I love that you have it on the wall. That's wonderful.
It really is. It really is. I'm going to pivot us again a little bit. Because speaking in the book, you talked, and I think I really want to ask you about this one because I think it's a really tricky one for people to know the right, and it's obviously case by case, but know the right circumstances, the right situation. But you talk about giving chances and believing in people and apologies. And that, you can't, the example you give is like with your mother and your father when they met and how he didn't show up and she was mad and then it turned out that they had just communicated the wrong location and then it worked out in the end. But that giving chances is how many chances you give someone and to be able to still move forward in that relationship, or what that apology needs to look like in order for that relationship to trust to try to be mended and to move forward after mistakes have been made.
Well, I'm very interested in this subject because in my own life, there have been people who have absolutely disappointed me by doing dreadful things. If you're a film producer or I have 8 entities in my life that I'm responsible for. So just in the normal course of business and charity and philanthropy and filmmaking and all the rest of it, people do bad things to you sometimes. And I've had to work out what to do. For example, a young woman completely screwed me in business. I mean, just no two ways about it. She lied and created a terrible situation for me in a particular thing that I was working on. So lawyers were involved and there was a settlement, but there was never an apology. And I just, moved off in a different direction. And there was a very, very long period of time where there was no communication at all, like months, maybe a year. And then a FedEx arrived with a 4-page handwritten apology. And I read this thing and I showed it to my adult children and I showed it to my wife. And I said, what am I going to do? She did this dreadful thing and she has given a 4-page handwritten, heartfelt apology. The whole family said, to hell with her. She did something really dreadful and there's no coming back from that. So I thought and slept on that and, prayed a little bit. And I wrote back and I said, I think what you've written is very brave. Not many people can do that. Consider yourself forgiven. But please remember that in every religion, what it says about redemption is that you have to do good deeds. And I want you to know that I'm watching. And lo and behold, she did, and formed a whole virtuous charitable thing for, kids in a bad place. And I mean, just extraordinary and admirably so. So, I think she brought it full circle and she expiated her own guilt, both by apologizing, but even more by putting back into the life force. The life force is a real thing. It's what we all share. It's another word for sort of this communal soul that we have. There's a great rabbi, 800 and something years ago, lived in Alexandria, Egypt, called Maimonides. He's the guy who wrote about generosity, where, it's a pyramid of value in generosity. Don't give a man fish, teach him to fish. Um, don't give with maximum signage in gold letters on a wall. The highest form of giving is anonymously. But he also wrote a thing about the soul. And this really resonated for me. And I'm sort of feeling it with you two wonderful people. Um, he said the highest level of the soul, which he gave a name, it's called the neshuma, N apostrophe Shuma. He said, you don't own it, and only a few people have it. It is the kind of membership club of all those who feel compelled to make the world a better place, or at least to try. And he says a remarkable thing that when I read it, all the hairs went up on the back of my neck. He said, when two people with the neshama meet for the very first time, they feel as though they have known each other 1,000 years. And they say, Hineni, here I am. Now what shall we do together? And I thought, yeah, it's like every 100th person or something. That is my network. I couldn't have done the 7 nonprofits. I couldn't have brought any of them home and made them succeed without thousands of other people. I'm very proud that the Starlight Children's Foundation, in all its chapters and offices and countries and all the rest of it, it's one of the most important children's charities in the world. It's raised over $1 billion to make seriously ill children happy. But I didn't raise that money. I only raised a little bit of it. But what I did is I led it forward and put teams together. It's what you do as a film producer. You cast your film, but you also cast the technical crew, and you put together an organization where hopefully everybody cooperates, and one makes 3, and you do important things. And when you do it in the non-profit sphere, 2 things happen. Number one, your neshama gets bigger because you become part of the life force, and people come out of the woodwork and say, "Can I help you? What do you need? Here I am." And I tremendously have always valued that. I just didn't know what the name was until I read the Maimonides. But the other thing is, I think in the end, that's where you find a big pillar of your own happiness. In the end, you have to get outside your own bubble, find someone who needs your help, and help them. You can do it in a charity, you can do it one-on-one, but just do it. There's a class that I teach in First Star. I really feel I'm only equipped to teach 2 classes. One is videography, because I know a thing about that. But the other one is called Random Acts of Kindness and Pay It Forward. And it's a 2-class little mini course. And I do it with 10th graders. And I start off by saying, okay, you're walking along the sidewalk and there is an old lady in front of you, fast asleep, lying face down in rags. 3 choices. Do you stop and put $1 under her arm? Do you stop, wake her up and give her $1? Or do you look the other way and walk past? And we talk about why would anyone do each of those things? And it becomes a class about the golden rule, the sense that not all humans, but thankfully most humans have, because it binds us together and builds society, that there are things that are unfair and we should try and do something about them. And that's had a dramatic impact on my life, because all the charities, all 7 of them, started because I saw something that was out of kilter. And then I say, there are 170 religions in the world, and this sense of social justice is and of seeking to create fairness and of empathy. It's in every single set of scriptures of the whole 170 religions. And they kind of take that in, we talk about it. And then I say, but what if someone was an atheist? Does that mean they would walk past the old lady? And they always say, no, 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 no. You could have, ethics and your heart could be moved if you were an atheist. And that leads to a conversation about the second law of thermodynamics. In any 10th grade class, there's usually like two kids at the back who have ever heard of that. And the second law says, it's Einstein, in any closed system, if you do not apply energy, it will fall to bits. If you do not oil the motor in your car, it will eventually stop turning. If you do not nurture your family, you won't have one. If you do not take care of your planet, it'll eventually get so hot that people will migrate and no height of wall will stop them because it will be millions of people and they will always seek to take care of their children and their families and themselves. So then I say to them, you'll really enjoy tomorrow's class because each of you is going to receive $200. And they say, seriously? We're going to get $200? And I say, well, you don't get to keep it. The whole point is you're going to write a little essay to whom or to what you wish $200 to go. And these essays are a great joy to me and every adult who's privileged to read them. My name is Jose. I'm adding $10. That makes 210, which is 3 times 70. And that's because down at the shelter, it takes $70 for them not to euthanize, not to kill a dog. And I'm going to save 3 puppies. And the reason I'm going to save 3 puppies is the last time I was down there, I looked into the eyes of a puppy that had been very badly beaten. And I saw my own eyes because I was very badly beaten as well. Love, Jose. Wonderful. Or how about this one? My mum did some bad things and now she's in prison. They always know exactly how long the relative will be in prison. She'll be there another 2 years, 3 months, and 7 days. I know she hates the shampoo. I love her very much, and I'm going to put the money into her prison account so that she can buy better toiletries.
Oh.
These kids, these foster kids, every one of them, it's like watching flowers grow. It gives them agency. It gives them power. It makes them realize I'm not the one who's worse off. I'm pretty badly off. However, there's someone in a worse place than me, and I can find them and help them. And by doing that, it's as though they all grow about a foot in the process of this class. And then we go back a few weeks later and we see, did the homeless chap, did he buy the shoes or did he buy a big bottle of brandy? Philanthropy doesn't always work. But we have this amazing donor in Dallas called Mort. I love him very much. And when he said to me, I want to give some money, very wealthy guy, he said, I want to give some money. Where do you most want it to go? Because there's so many choices with you. And I said, I got this idea for a new class, random acts of kindness and pay it forward. He said, I'm in. And he sent the money.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I'm doing that with my kids. I want to read every single one of those. Are they published? I want to read these essays. They sound.
I can send them to you.
Oh,
We have to be very careful with the confidentiality thing,
of course,
because they're foster kids. But yeah, they exist. I've got multiple rounds of them. We put them in a little deck. They are the single most powerful way I raise money. There is nothing when you go to a high net worth or ultra high net worth person that is more powerful than showing them that the kids that they are going to hopefully generously help are themselves helping those less fortunate. That is a big kick in the head
Yeah.
to be generous.
I'm so moved.
Yeah.
I'm so moved. I just have goosebumps. That is just the most remarkable thing. I want to, if I may, can I take a little moment, Sammy?
Yeah, you do what you got to do.
I I just this might be a little bit of a turn, but I wanted the Neshuma, am I saying it right?
Neshama, yeah. It's
I
it's weird. Growing up Jewish, I used to have grandparents, and every so often they would say, "Oh yeah, him. He's got the neshama," and I knew it was good because they would say it about good people. I had no clue for like 40 years or something
what it was.
what the heck it was until my mother-in-law, a psychologist, she said, when you talk about these people that help you, have you ever read Maimonides? I said, absolutely not. I don't know anything about him. And she said, well, you should, because he talks about that. So there you
It's
go.
it's so beautiful and I love it. And I want to tell you about this. So Sammy and I go to this event. We've been 2 years in a row now. There is a lady, her name is Jessica Jansen. She wrote a book called Bring the Joy. And every year, so she lost her son to spinal muscular atrophy when he was 6 months old, Sammy. Every year on his birthday, she throws this great big benefit party and raises money for spinal muscular atrophy. And it's just this incredibly beautiful thing. And Sammy and I, we go to this event and we're so awestruck. We watch as people raise money and pool together, and we watch as grieving parents celebrate the life of their son and bring, they use their grief in a positive way, and they are raising a lot of money for this cause. And Sammy and I sit there and we watch in awe, and we just have goosebumps as we watch this happen. And I've always been like, I don't know what this is, but it's so beautiful. What is happening here? It's Neshuma. That's what it is. Sammy,
Well,
there's a
it's
word.
it's also finding happy,
Yes.
All roads
Like,
lead to Rome. When I started the Starlight Children's Foundation, it was because my cousin and I collaborated on one wish for one dying child who wanted to go to Disneyland, and we just did it, flew him to LA from London, and there was so much that I hadn't thought through that were benefits from it. I mean, obviously he enjoyed himself, but then his mum, who came as well from London, Brenda, she, after her son passed away, was left with the memory of him, on the teacups at Disneyland, having a fine old time, as opposed to passing away in a hospital bed with a tube up his nose. So that was benefit. But also, it gave us enormous joy. And that was why I called the meeting. Film producers, what do? We call meetings. And I cast the meeting. I thought, what do I need? I need a lawyer. I'd never done anything in charity work before. I thought, well, you always need a lawyer. We're going to have to form an entity, and I need an accountant, and I need a publicist, and I need a graphic designer, and I need a bookkeeper, and I need all these things. Someone who understands the politics of hospitals, because we've got to source the kids we're going to make happy, and so forth. I'd had one date back when I was single, and I had had one date with this really beautiful young woman. And I remembered she had said to me that she was an accountant. And I phoned her up and I said, remember me, I'm so sorry. I've been traveling, and, I made pathetic excuses why I hadn't called her. And I said, listen, I think this is going to be a new charity. Could you please come to the meeting? Because I think we might need some accountancy help. And so she came to the meeting. And when the lawyer said, what do you want to call it? I said, I haven't given that any thought at all. And it was the young lady, that being effectively our second date. She said, the children's rhyme, starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might have this wish I wish tonight. She said, why didn't we call it the Starlight Children's Foundation? And we all said, yeah. And the graphic designer sitting there said, I can see the logo in my head. It's a child reaching for a star. And we all said, yeah, do that. And so that was the second date. And we put the charity together, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger and more successful. And we had dates and dates and dates. And I considered that, the best kind of date was volunteering alongside her in building this charity up. And then came the Christmas party in the children's ward at County USC Medical Center. And we had a live band, and a ton of kids came in, with IV poles and in their smocks and all the rest of it. And several of them were so ill that they couldn't get out of bed, and they were wheeled in the whole bed. And one of the little girls, while all the kids were dancing, I looked, and it was incredibly moving because the little girl who couldn't get out of bed was dancing in bed horizontally. Oh. And we had these adult-sized animal costumes that had been donated to us by Sealand or Marineland. And one of them was a dolphin. And the accounting lady was inside the dolphin. And I could see her face through the thing in the chest of the dolphin, so that she could walk around and not fall over. And I could see her looking out and see her reacting to the little girl who was dancing, couldn't get out of bed. And all the mascara had gone down her cheeks because she was crying her eyes out. And my epiphany was, I thought, oh, I love this person. Oh. And so we had more dates, and eventually I proposed, and we got married, and we had our children, and that's my wife.
Oh, I love this story so much.
So when I say finding happy, get outside yourself and help someone, well, I know what I speak. That's how I found my wife.
Mm-hmm. That is the best story.
I mean, and it is the best story. I absolutely agree. But that getting outside yourself, I think that, and I don't mean to be negative, but very much so everybody says, well, you can't meet people in the real world anymore. And I'm like, well, you can. You're just choosing not to. You're choosing not to go to those places to meet people. You're choosing not to step forward and do that. And I so vividly remember this video that came out, oh gosh, probably when smartphones first came about. It was in the transition from regular cell phones to smartphones. And I remember it was a man walking, and he's walking down the street, and he uses his app on his phone to figure out where he's got to go. And he just uses his phone to lead him down the street. And that's the video. He goes down, he gets to where he's going to go, and that's the end. And then the other one is he stops at the corner. He's not on his phone, and he asks someone for directions. And that person chooses to walk him to the next place. And that gives him another person to speak to. And then he ends up marrying the person who he met on that first corner. And it's like, it's one of those things, right? If you didn't have all those interactions, if you weren't showing up in person to do those things, you wouldn't have met her. If you hadn't made that brave phone call that you had to make to say, so sorry I didn't call back, come be a part of my thing. If you hadn't used that bravery to do that, to make those phone calls, that wouldn't have happened. And so being a person in the world, showing up, whether it's in charity or as a human being, like that's where those connections are built and made. And you're exactly right. It is what finds that happiness. And so...
Well, and also for young adults, one of the things I really believe in, I've come to believe in, is that unconditional love. You have to have someone who loves you unconditionally in order to thrive as a young adult, or possibly as any human being. I think we all need to love and be loved, and to have that safe family place. And the pathetic thing about the 500,000 American kids who are in foster care is that generally they absolutely don't have that. Tiny fraction of them have been able to find that. They're living with strangers, either in a group home or with a family of strangers. I had lunch the other day with one of the First Star scholars, we call them. I'm the one who said, why would we call them students? Let's call them scholars. Maybe they'll behave as scholars. So we have them in cohorts, classes of 30 scholars. And I was at lunch with one of the boys, one of the young men. And I said, I've never known a human being that was as hungry as you. Every time I see you at a meal, you are eating like 3 times as much food as I can possibly believe any human can eat. And he said, well, I'm always hungry. And I said, well, why are you hungry? And he said, well, I'm growing, but also, I always go to bed hungry in my placement in the foster placement. And I said, well, why can't you just go to the fridge and make yourself a sandwich or something? And he said, well, because it's padlocked. And I said, wait. You are living with a foster family who are responsible for housing, feeding, and raising you. And they have a padlock on the refrigerator. Yeah, they do. And I said, who have keys? And he said, well, the couple who run the home and their 2 teenage kids, they all have keys. I'm a foster kid. I don't get a key.
Stop it.
Think of what is the subliminal message to you of realizing you can't have a sandwich because there's a padlock on the fridge. I'll give you another one. One of the first things we do with our rising ninth graders is we give them all a rather handy dandy rollerboard suitcase. Why? Because what is normally given to them, the social worker says, be ready at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'm moving you to another placement, way off, 50 miles away. And the kid says, but why do I have to move? I only just got comfortable here. And we're like, can I stay in the school? No, you'll be going to a new school. And what the social worker gives the kid to put their stuff in, their clothes, their diary, their poems, their music, whatever, is a trash bag. What is the subliminal message that your stuff, your worldly belongings, all they deserve to be carried in is a trash bag? So it's a very wonderful, they all scream with happiness because we have the youth coaches, that's part of our staffing model. They push in like a conga line of 30 rollerboard suitcases. They sort of come in like, in the airport when you see them moving the carts around in a long thing, it's kind of a bit like that. And they all get one. And that's between that and the laptop, those are the gifts that are most meaningful. You can tell who's a homeless kid or who's a kid in foster care in your average high school classroom because they are the ones with no technology, but not our kids.
My heart is just pounding right now. Like it hurts my heart to know the way that kids are treated. I remember I knew a woman, this was years ago, and she was adopting a kid. He was in foster care. And I remember her telling me the story. He was about 3 or 4 years old when she adopted him, and of them being invited to the home to go for a meal. And so they all sit down at the table, the adults sit down at the table, and they call the children to come in and eat. And they just put the kids' plates on like the lower part of this counter. And I can't remember how many kids they are. All of them come in and they aren't taught to sit as a family. They aren't taught to sit together. They just like scoop their food into their mouths and then they leave. And that was it. And she said, and then there was a playroom in this house that was basically a big glass wall with a door. And the kids would go in to play and then they would shut the door and lock the kids in. And the kids couldn't get out. The kids couldn't get out unless they let them out. And that would happen in the bathrooms. These 2, 3, 4-year-olds, if they went into the bathroom and they closed the door, they were locked in there until somebody came and let them out. And she said, like that day, we just took him. We just took our foster kid and we're like, he's not coming back here. I don't care if this doesn't work. He will be better at our house. Like, no way. And it's heartbreaking when you hear what's going on in these foster homes. And that's why it's so incredible what you're doing to empower all of these kids in these foster homes. Like, it's just... Yeah. It's unreal, and I don't even have better words for it. And I want to talk about something we chatted about before, because this kind of leads into it before recording, was how many of these kids now in foster care because their parents are being deported because of the current situation. And so not only are there already kids in foster care that grew up here and their parents were born, I should say here in the States, and their parents are born here and they have trouble raising them, so the kids up in foster care. And now we have more kids ending up in foster care because their parents are being deported. And like, can you share on what that is for you and what's going on over there in that regard?
I'm not going to be political, but I will say that in the end, politics is the morality of government. And I will say that regardless of whether one is conservative or liberal, or in my case, kind of one foot in each camp, I do believe that there is a level of fear and cruelty that is counterproductive to humanity, regardless of, even if there is a noble goal, I think to harm women and children, and especially children, and make them sad and make them depressed is a very bad thing. And I would have hoped that a better way could be found to run immigration in this country. It's been messed up by both parties for decades in politics and government. It is not the fault of those who have come in as refugees, trying to make a better life for their children. And to simply yank people off the street and throw them into an airplane and send them off to South Sudan or somewhere where they don't know anybody, I find impossible to get my head around. I do believe that sometimes assertive things have to be done by government. And I believe countries need borders. But I also believe when the government in both parties has screwed up immigration for 40 years, I don't believe the solution should be exerted on the heads of little children. There has to be a pathway for them not to have their lives disrupted and ruined when they aren't responsible for anything that the politicians don't like. So I also think that if you said to me, what is the greatest evil in the world? Well, nuclear proliferation, that's pretty bad. Climate change, that's pretty bad. Existential threats. But I think underpinning the whole thing is tribalism. We went on a family vacation a while back to Perigord in France. And one of the things that we did there is they had discovered these prehistoric cave systems where both the Neanderthals and then later Homo sapiens lived. And I had never been in, ancient Stone Age caves before. I was really thunderstruck by sort of what was the visceral experience of being in these caves. First of all, very low ceiling. Secondly, very dark. And thirdly, very cold. And I thought, okay, so this was the life of someone in a cave family. They were hungry, they were cold, they were scared stiff. And the leader said to them, those people who live over the other side of the valley, who dress different and look a bit different, they want what you need. They want your food, they want your women. And I know you feel scared of them, but don't be scared. Just hate them. I'll help you hate them and I will keep you safe. Unfortunately, Samuelson's law is you can take the humans out of the caves, but you kind of can't take the caves out of the humans. And I think in our DNA, 100,000 years later, there is a willingness to hate, which is simply a mask on being scared of other. And I think it's very easy for an authoritarian dictatorship to channel that fear by making it more an assertive hatred and saying, but don't worry, because I'm dealing with it. And I think it's really false. I'm very interested. I've been sort of mesmerized, fascinated by Germany of the late 1920s and the early 1930s. For years and years, I've kind of studied it. Sort of at what point did the slippery slope of Hitler and the Nazis become so slippery that everybody fell over and nothing could be done short of a world war to stop him. And, it's complex. And I think we must be very careful. Democracy is not a perfect system, but it is by far the best one anyone's ever been able to invent. We have to have a way of recalling our leaders. There have to be elections. There have to be due process. People should not be pulled off the street and packed off without the opportunity to appear before a judge. And I don't know where things are going. And, some of the things that the Trump government are doing, I actually agree with. I do think there's waste in government, but I think, there's a bit too much of the chainsaw in all of these things, and also a willingness to throw out what has taken 200 years to build, which is some guardrails on society. All of us should want due process. We don't want to be pulled off the street. We want to, be able to appeal to a judge and so forth. So I worry a lot, and I know through the mentoring, this is incredibly challenging to young adults, regardless of the politics of the household. These are very worrying times for kids in any kind of an upbringing, and I think they need help. And the book, Finding Happy, is my attempt to help them sort of, if the problem is too complex, it's so macro, how could I ever affect that? Well, when the macro is unconquerable, you do your micro. Get your qualification, choose your career, have plan B, find the right person to love and be loved by. You take care of you, but by the way, take care of other people as well, and watch how that makes you happy. It's a complex subject, but there's 328 pages in the book.
Gosh, that's beautiful.
It is. And I want to respect your time, but I have so many questions. But I really want to ask, what is it that people can do then to help in that regard, to help with foster kids, to help with what's going on with people being deported? Is there anything that people can do that you can say this could help?
Yes. Well, there are so many opportunities. Charities cry out for volunteers. There is never enough help. And I say to young people, there's a whole chapter where the chapter title is Selflessness Can Be Selfish, and That's Fine. Because I actually believe as a young adult, if you go and volunteer at a charity, there are so many advantages to you. First of all, your good idea, dare to have a good idea. You'll be the vice president in charge of implementing it in about 5 minutes. You'll get promoted much faster. You'll meet wonderful people. You'll share experiences and aspirations and ethics with them, and thus you will bond with them, and you will feel that you're part of a group that is greater than the sum of its parts, and you will do good. So absolutely, there's so many opportunities to volunteer, and there's a ton of them in the book. And not just my nonprofits, we take all the volunteers we can, and we train them as well. But there's so many opportunities, and it's a wonderful pathway for a young adult in parallel to what can be an absolute, I am going to make a living, I am going to put food on the table, I'm going to be able to buy a house and raise a family. Absolutely, go for it. I'm a big capitalist, and I believe that, money is not a bad thing. You do need a certain amount of it, but I think mostly it doesn't give you happiness. Mostly happiness comes from your relationship with those around you, the unconditional love thing, bilaterally, but also in helping other people who are less fortunate. And God knows there's a ton of them. If all these people lose their health insurance, I have no idea what's about to happen. But if they lose their health insurance and they lose food stamps and they lose this, that, and the other, our food kitchens are going to be overrun. The number of unhoused people is going to exponentially grow. Tons of needs for people to help. I know a guy who takes 100 supermarket plastic bags to the supermarket, fills them with staples, and then goes out in his van and just goes up to homeless people and gives them each a bag. And that's grassroots, the neshama. That is grassroots making a difference. And I do believe he makes himself happy as a result.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'll name him. His name is Richard Stellar, Stellar, and you can Google him. He's a good friend. He has been part of the volunteer force of every charity since my original one decades ago.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, charity work is like, that you're making a difference in someone else's life. Even if you can't see it, but you just know it. It really does help you feel like it is selfish in that regard. Like, you really are making a difference for people. And thank you for saying that. That's incredible. Yeah.
Well, and don't just do it. Talk about it. Do your TikTok, do your Insta, do your Facebook, post about it on X. Tell other people, we're all in this thing together. Once you're doing it and you truly understand the benefit of it for those people that you're helping and also for you and those you're collaborating with, talk about it. Life is influencers these days.
Yeah.
Do a bit of influencing, not just for the purchasing of cosmetics, because the cosmetics company is paying you to tout their latest face cream. Do a bit of influencer to influence people to do good. Yeah. How about that for a novel concept?
Absolutely. I mean, like, even just doing it in person. Oh, yes. But I just have to tell this quick story. I remember I was really young. I was like 21 or something. And I had this thing I did every year that was giving out, doesn't matter what it was, but somebody at the place I worked saw me doing it. And I didn't know this person. He was a regular. He just kind of came into the place a lot. And he comes up to me when I'm eating lunch the next day after seeing me do this thing. And he goes, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "Why'd you do that? Why do you do that?" And I was like looking at my lunch and looking at him, and I was so utterly confused as to what he was asking me about. And he goes, "Why do you do what you did yesterday?" And I said, "Why not?" And he was like, "Don't you like money?" I said, "Of course I do, but I bet the person that just got it likes it more than I do right now." And he was just so mind-boggled. And so this is without social media. I didn't have social media at the time. But even when you do it, there's people around you who are watching, and they can see that, and you can shift their perspective just a little bit. Hopefully shift their perspective so that they might go do something too. Beyond social media, the actions you're doing also make a difference.
And the metaphor I've used in the book is that in the end, we all live two lives. There is the natural life, which you're born, you live your life, you do whatever you do, and eventually you die. It's inevitable. That's what it is, the end. But there is another equally real life, which consists of our effect on the people we help. Whether we educate them or we lift them up, they then go on and help other people. And those ripples go across the pond with them, their children, their children's children, the first generation of help that you did, the second generation that they did, the third, the 50th, the 100th generation. Those ripples on the pond, you live in them. And the good thing is that life is very real. You're in those people, including the ones that you may never meet because you've been dead years. But those helped by those that were helped by those who were helped, etc., all the way back up to whatever you did to help, you're in them. And that life is forever.
And think about how many people that is for you right now. Like with all of your charities,
My
how
God.
many? Like it's innumerable. Like it's my kids like to use the word Googleplex all the time. It's Googleplex. Like the amount of people that you're impacting and that have maybe not your name, but the essence of you and what you've created between your charities and your books. Like it's amazing. And we even we didn't put this together, but as I'm finishing up your book and I went to follow your certain charities on our social media, and we realized like how tied in we have been to your causes this whole time, and not knowing it, and we did not know who you were or anything about you until we received an email. But we take 2 causes every year that we rally behind to raise awareness behind, and we do a month dedicated to episodes on that, and we support the charities and promote the charities for those causes. And last year we did spinal muscular atrophy and childhood cancer awareness, and I recently just saw that so many of our childhood cancer families follow your Starlight account, and are because they've had kids that have passed away, and hearing the stories, and most of them were through Make-A-Wish that their things happened, but doing similar things is we've been hearing the other side of how much the help they receive from these charities has impacted them as a family, whether their child is still here or they've lost their child. Those memories, just like you said, have made such difference. I'm going to cry over here. Has made such a difference for these families. And so the things that you're doing are incredible. And on top of that, this year, one of our awarenesses is domestic violence awareness that we're doing in the month of October. And we were just thinking on the path of like spousal relationships was where our heads were going. And I'm reading your book and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're missing a whole other level. We're missing a whole other level of domestic violence from parents to children. And now we're like, okay, we need to reach out and see if there's anybody who has a story to share that wants to speak about that. And they can do it anonymously if they want or not. But there's a whole level that we're missing that had we not read your book, we might have just whooshed past in our domestic violence awareness month. And so the things that you're doing are so tied into so many other people, and we've been so connected to you, unbeknownst to us, for not actually connected to you, but the causes you're doing for so long that we're like, this conversation needed to happen. It's unreal. And so, yeah, I just had to share with you how much that's spread across the things that we're also doing.
Well,
even though
should you grace us, and I'm not being pushy, but should you decide that EDAR or First Star or Starlight or any combination of them might be in your next wave of who do we help, we can absolutely support and cooperate. And, Hineni, here I am.
Oh, that's so kind of you.
I mean, love that.
We'll definitely highlight First Star as one of our, so we were going to do a local one that's Rowan House here where we live in Calgary, and we can open up this other level of thinking that we weren't at before. So just thank you.
And don't forget EDAR.
Yes.
I'm very challenged in EDAR at the moment because the single user homeless shelters that we put out on the streets, they're made in China, and they now have this massive, basically our landed cost at the port of Long Beach has doubled.
Oh.
So I have to raise a whole lot more money if we're going to carry on at the clip we've been going. So, but yeah, edar.org or firststar.org or starlight.org. Just remember, it's easy to remember because at least the first 2, it's the children's rhyme: Starlight, Starbright, First Star.
Yeah.
I love it.
Absolutely. Yes, we will highlight them for sure. And I mean, yeah, we might have to do something. We just say these causes keep naturally kind of coming up to us, and so we're just jumping on them as they come. So EDAR might have to be the next one, at least one to rally around. I really want to ask you one last question, unless you have anything else.
You go ahead, Sammy.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I want to ask if you were to go back to yourself when you first started that first charity, and you were to think about what you could have known then, or what could have helped you then to maybe make it grow faster, or make it, I don't know the exact timeline of everything, but something that would have really helped you back then. Is there some piece of advice that you could give yourself or someone in that same position right now that you think would make a difference for starting a charity?
The absolutely first thing is to learn the story. You have to, and this is a whole chapter in the book, in anything you want to achieve, you can't set off on a trek and take the first step unless you know what direction you're going. And what that really means in starting a nonprofit is you have to be able to tell the story of the organization, what it is, how it works, who it helps, as though it already existed. You have to inhabit it. And one of the things you learn as a film producer is how to tell a story. Because think of it, there might be a script or there might only be a novel, and we have to go and raise $20 million to turn it into a film. How do you do that? How do you get a famous director to want to make your film? How do you cast it? You have to be able to compellingly tell the story. And that is exactly the same with a cause or with a charity. You have to work out, number one, how to tell the story. And then carrying on kind of the metaphor of the toolkit of a film producer, okay, what do I need to make this happen? Who is the crew? Where will the money come from? What's the budget? How much money do I need? Who's distributing? How will we measure whether it is any good? Do we pilot it in one place and then work outwards from that? Or do we open wide? Those are your steps. And it is the work of, even in the early days of a charity, dozens of people. And you have to kind of cast your meetings to address what you know you're going to have to deal with. But the primary driver of everything that I've done that worked is it was a compelling story. I was able to move someone's heart, to help them to feel empathy for whoever it is we're helping, so that they wanted to help me. And all I do is I lead. I try and lead. There's a wonderful concept called servant leadership, which is basically lead from the middle. Don't just tell people what to do. Empower people to give their best by giving them all the props and the leadership opportunities and the responsibilities that they're capable of exerting. And just be the general, be the encourager, be the person who recognizes what's good and keep it on mission. But it begins with telling the story.
And mic drop. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful for you sharing your time with us and sharing so much of your insight and wisdom in addition to the book. We can't wait to release this episode. We're just so grateful for your time and being with us today. Thank you so much. We know this is going to impact a lot of people on top of your book.
Well, shameless blurb. It drops June 10.
Yes.
And it's on Amazon and all the other online places, Audible for the audio one and so forth. And it's in bookstores. The funniest line is that Simon & Schuster have been placing it in all these different retail chains. And on a family Zoom on a Sunday night, I told the family the latest one was Target and, the drugstore chain and more than that, kind of a supermarket chain now. And there was a silence. And my son said, where are they going to put the big pile of books? And I said, I have no idea. Prominently, I hope. He said, I think you should tell them that its natural place is between the condoms and the plastic cutlery. I think that is actually, thank you very much. I think that is its natural place in the universe. And I'm going to tell them.
I wish we had Target here so I could go find that aisle.
Anybody who wants to get the book, www.samuelson.la, samuelson.la. It's got all the links right there and some other stuff you may or may not be interested in and some video and so forth. And I would love feedback. The publisher thinks I'm raving mad, but I did it anyway. I have put my email address in the book. And the publisher said, what are you going to do if you get 25,000 emails? And I said, I will hire people to help me reply, but I'll tell them what to say. And I did compromise. I buried it in the book. So you would actually need to poke through the book and actually read the book to find the email. But it is there. It's finding happy, There you go.
Well, it was very nice to meet you. We keep saying it. We're so grateful. We're moved. We're like ready to go forth and spread the message. We're really grateful for your time. And it's just so lovely to spend our morning together. So thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Really, truly.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. To help support the growth of this podcast, please feel free to leave us a review, follow us on socials, or recommend us to your friends. Your support honestly means the world to us. With love, Sammy and Melissa. We had to reach back out and ask Peter Samuelson, after writing a book called Finding Happy, if he himself was happy and what brings him happiness. And here's his answer.
Well, I am. I think I am a very happy guy. And what makes me happy after all these years, I realize, is my 7 non-profits, my charities, my philanthropies. I'm not without happiness that comes from creating films. There is a great joy standing at the back of an auditorium and realizing that the audience is with you, and you're likely to get good word of mouth, and if it's a comedy they laugh at it, if it's a scary film they scream. That does have value, and that's part of one's legacy. But mostly what I love is getting foster kids into college and seeing them build wonderful middle-class lives and themselves be happy. I'm made enormously happy by making seriously ill children happy, and I love it when we get a homeless old lady off the damp concrete, out of the cardboard box, and into an EDAR unit. So yeah, I'm happy, and that I think is the principal way that I'm happy. I'm also made happy by my children and seeing them succeed, but the megaphone of happiness pointed towards me is absolutely the charities.